It is time for the Panther-Lair Show here on a Tuesday night. Let's make sure we actually have audio. It looks like you can hear me to start the show as opposed to last week when we started off with a minute and a half or so of dead air, and I apologize for that, especially if you ended up downloading the podcast on Wednesday and you got it and you said, what's going on? This is 90 seconds of silence. And I managed to go back in and edit it and just cut out that 90 seconds of dead air. So I apologize for that. Apologize for everyone who tuned in last week at 8:30 and sat there for a minute and a half and wondered why they couldn't hear me. I think you can hear me now. If you can't hear me now, get in the comments, the comment section on the live stream, and tell me that you can't hear me, and then we know that things are not working. But I think they are. Everything on my computer screen is telling me that they're working. And so here we go with this week's Panther-Lair podcast. Of course, we go live on YouTube every Tuesday night at 8:30 p.m. Royce Beacom, one of the regulars chiming in, S-Mac chiming in. He's a regular on the, or she, I don't know if you're a he or a she, S-Mac, but everybody chiming in saying they can hear it. We appreciate it. We do this every Tuesday night, 8:30 p.m. on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That's our YouTube channel. And we go live here every Tuesday night to talk a little Pitt sports. And, got people already chiming in the comment section, and that's a lot of the fun that we can have, is we can have a little back and forth about Pitt sports. We'll take the audio from this podcast, from this live stream, and turn it into a podcast, and maybe that's how you're listening to things right now if you're listening later in the week. But I think the fun is sort of be here in the moment, having a little conversation and talking a little Pitt sports. I like to think it's a little more live, a little more interactive than even you'll get on a sports talk radio show, because you can get on the comment section right there on YouTube and you can respond to what I'm saying right now. We can have a little back and forth. I always think to myself that when I sit down and prepare for the podcast, put together a few topics, I got my sheet here of a few things that I want to talk about, scribbled down in a kind of chicken scratch that only I can read. I like to think that I scribble out enough topics to cover the hour that we usually sit here and talk, but I end up getting through about half of them because people chime in the comments and we sort of go off and diverge in a different conversation. And that's what's fun about it. That's what I like doing. You guys help fill things in, fill in the conversation and fill in the discussion. So that's what we do here on Tuesday nights. Of course, you know the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, recruiting, you find it all at Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com. And when we talk about Pitt conversations, that's what's going on Panther-Lair.com all the time, is you can go to the message boards where we're talking about Pitt sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're constantly having those discussions and conversations. What we do for an hour here on Tuesday nights, we do all day, every day on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. And a lot of times the conversations we have here or the topics we discuss here are kind of born out of discussions on the message board. So if you're not on Panther-Lair.com, you should go check that out, Panther-Lair.com. And of course, we got to give a quick shout out. I don't have one of their shirts on tonight because I think they're in the laundry, but Home Field Apparel, national collegiate sports apparel shirts, some of the softest t-shirts, softest sweatshirts I've ever seen. They've got a great pick collection, homefieldapparel.com. Go there, shop the vintage pick collection. They've got some great shirt designs, all inspired and influenced by what they've heard from Pitt fans. They've got a shirt that says 13-9. I mean, you might be able to figure that out with your own research, and you also might get input from Pitt fans who can tell you this is what we want on a shirt. And so they've done that, and they've created a great collection of Pitt gear. Go check it out, homefieldapparel.com. Use the promo code LAIR, L-A-I-R, and you can get 20% off your order of vintage Pitt gear. So go check that out. I don't have a home field shirt on tonight. I didn't plan this out well and do laundry in time to be able to show it off. But I mean, you've seen it the last couple of weeks with the home field apparel. It's awesome stuff. homefieldapparel.com. So go check that out. Lots of links to send you to there. But here we are at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. This is the place to be on a Tuesday night to talk about everything going on in Pitt sports. And lucky for us, there was some news that came out on Tuesday and gave us plenty of things to talk about tonight. And to start with the biggest news, Damari Mathis, senior cornerback, out for the season after suffering an injury earlier in training camp, a season-ending injury earlier in training camp. And I mean, it's a season-ending injury for a senior, not necessarily a career-ending injury for a couple of reasons. One, he never redshirted, so Damari Mathis, in a normal year, if this had happened, could have taken his red shirt this year and come back in 2021 as a redshirt senior. But it's not a normal year, as we all know. The NCAA basically said, for your eligibility clock, this year doesn't count. And so for Damari Mathis and everybody else who plays this season, this isn't going to count. They'll come back next year with the same eligibility as they would have had this year. So Damari Mathis, injury or not, was going to be able to be a senior next year if he is so inclined, and he'll have that option now. So he's going to miss this season. He's going to miss 2020 or whatever the 2020 season ends up being, but he's going to have that option to come back in 2021. We'll talk about what that could mean going forward, but the bigger question is what it means for right now. And if there was a position on defense where you really said, and I mean, we certainly did say that, boy, they've got a lot of depth all over this defense. They've got a lot of talent. They got a lot of starters. They got a lot of experience. But there's one spot that's a little bit thin. It was the secondary in general and the cornerbacks in particular. Obviously, Pitt returns Jason Pinnock and Damari Mathis. These guys have been playing since they were freshmen in 2017. Mathis has, played in 30-some games over the last 3 years. He's made like 12 starts. He started 10 games last year. He was really the primary starter opposite Dane Jackson. Dane Jackson started all the games. And then they kind of rotated Damari Mathis and Jason Pinnock opposite him, but Mathis started the bulk of the games. Like I say, making 10 starts. He had 2 interceptions. Really good player. And I think you get some debate about who was the better pro prospect, Damari Mathis or Jason Pinnock. But I think you'll find a lot of people who tell you it was Damari Mathis. I've been a big Pinnock guy myself since he got to Pitt, since he was getting recruited and since he got to Pitt. But I think with the way that Mathis has played the past few years, I think he's played himself into a legit pro prospect. Potentially, at least where Dane Jackson ended up going in the 7th round, and potentially even better than that with a strong senior season. Now, obviously, he's going to lose that, and he'll have to decide for himself if he wants to come back and try and improve his draft status. But they rotated those 3 guys last year, Dane Jackson, Jason Pinnock, and Damari Mathis, and I think they had a good rotation. They were able to keep guys fresh, and they obviously got very good play out of those corners. I think the corners were as strong, if not stronger, and probably were stronger last year than they had been in any of the first, 4 seasons of the Pat Narduzzi era, which, we kept waiting for that time to come with where it would start looking like Darqueze Dennard and Trey Waynes out there, and finally it happened last year with Dane Jackson and Damari Mathis and Jason Pinnock. And so you had concerns about the depth at corner coming into 2020 because you really didn't have a lot of experience behind Pinnock and Mathis, but because you had Pinnock and Mathis, I think we were able to kind of write it off a little bit and say, well, yeah, they're thin, but it's okay because Pinnock and Mathis are really good and they've got a lot of experience and those guys are ready to go. Now, if you lose one of those guys, now your depth is going to be tested. When they lost Jalen Twyman to the opt-out, he said, boy, that stinks. Twyman was one of the best players on defense, outstanding defensive tackle, a D tackle who gets 10.5 sacks. Those guys don't grow on trees. You don't find that very often. But he said, well, that stinks. That's rough. It hurts to lose a really talented player, but you've got Keyshawn Camp coming back. You've got Devin Danielson with a ton of experience last season. You've got Tyler Bentley and David Green who got a lot of experience last year. They could weather that storm. As good as Patrick Jones is and as good as we expect Rashad Weaver to be and some of these younger DNs, you don't want to lose any of those guys, but you could handle it. You know what I mean? You could survive if you lost a defensive end. You don't want to. You want all those guys to be available and you want all those guys to play because they're all really good, and the depth and experience in the depth and the talent in the depth is one of the strengths of the defensive end position. But they were able to weather that storm. They were able to survive losing Jalen Twyman, and they would be able to survive losing one of the defensive ends because they built that depth up so well. Cornerback is not the same, and TRR points out the safety depth is pretty thin too, and we'll talk about the safeties in a second. But the corners is not really the same, and part of it is look, you're going to have a point. College football is cyclical, right? Where you'll go through ups and downs. You'll go through cycles where you've got a lot of depth, and then your depth maybe isn't as strong as you would like it to be. Just every few years. And so last year they were in a really strong position with Dane Jackson and Jason Pinnock and Damari Mathis. But because they had those three guys, they were able to rotate those three, and they took basically all of the snaps. Marquez Williams played a little bit, and that was it. You had three guys who took all of the snaps. So inevitably, you were going to come into the next season when one of those guys graduates, or God forbid, if both of them graduate, and you weren't going to have a lot of experience in the depth. And quite frankly, if Damari Mathis didn't get hurt this year, right, you'd have Pinnock and Mathis both playing as seniors in 2020. And assuming neither one chose to come back, which they would both have the option to do, you would potentially, maybe have a third guy rotating in there, Marquez Williams or AJ Woods or whoever. You'd still probably be limited to just three guys playing this season because Pinnock and Mathis are that good. You don't want to take them off the field that long. So you're going to have an even bigger depth problem next year, at least in terms of experience. It's just sort of the cyclical nature. I mean, when you're not rotating five guys out there at corner, you're going to come to some points where you don't have a lot of experience. And so this year, they were going to be fortunate to have these two seniors in Pinnock and Mathis, but they weren't going to have a lot of guys behind them. And one of the key, I think, points of emphasis for this season, one of the things I think the coaches probably hope they will be able to do is get some experience for some of those younger corners and get those guys on the field so that they don't go into next season or wouldn't go into the 2021 season, which completely empty in terms of experience. Well, they're going to get some more experience there now because Mathis is out. And so who are you looking at? Who's going to step into that role? There's Marquez Williams. He came in the class of 2018. He's a redshirt 18, 19, 20, redshirt sophomore this year. There's AJ Woods, who played as a freshman last season. He played in 10 games on special teams. He'll be a sophomore this year. And then really you're looking at freshmen. Panther-Lair on Tuesday mentioned Javonte Royal and Rashad Battle, two guys who came in the 2020 class. Hunter Sellers is there as well. All three of them could play corner, could play safety. They all started off at corner because the coaches knew they were light on depth. And we've been talking about it all offseason, that this cornerback position is not deep. As part of the reason that Sellers, Battle, and Royal all started off at corner when, there were points when all three looked like they were being recruited as safeties, but they all started off at corner because the depth was so questionable. And it's another reason why you see the staff trying to take 2, 3, maybe 4 cornerbacks in this 2021 class. For as much as we talk about Pat Narduzzi and defensive back recruiting and loading up the corners and all this stuff, which he did in terms of numbers, we'll talk about the numbers in a minute. It hasn't exactly panned out thus far, and it's left them in a bit of a hole where they're going to use this 2020 class with 3 guys right now in battle, use the next class, the 2021 class, with probably 3 or 4 more corners to really build that stock back up and restock the position. Now, how do they get to this point? How do they end up so thin? I'm glad you asked. Let's look back at recruiting. We always talk about this. And I think I even spent a podcast talking about the depth at cornerback and the recruiting at cornerback in the past. Probably in the spring, I was writing those anatomy of a position articles where I just broke down the history of the position, how Pitt's current roster came together. And I look back at the corners. And, if you look at this year's roster, the 2020 roster, really there's 5 classes that can make up the 2020 roster. 2016, those guys would be seniors. Redshirt seniors this year. 2017 class, they would be redshirt juniors or seniors. 2018 class, they would be juniors or redshirt sophomores. 2019 class, they would be sophomores or redshirt freshmen. And then your 2020 class, which is your true freshman. Well, let's set the true freshmen aside for a second. Let's just look at the classes that would produce returning players. 2016, 17, 18, 19, right? 2016, you go back to that class. That's Damar Hamlin was in that class as a cornerback. He initially came to Pitt as a corner. He played corner in 2016 when they got so kind of wrecked by injuries and thin that they had to put him out there. Hell, Maurice French was playing snaps at corner that season, if you recall, in 2016 because they were that thin. 2017 was a class with Pinnock and Mathis. 2018, Marquez Williams, like I talked about, was in that class. And then 2019, A.J. Woods. Now, that's not everybody from those classes. Over those 4 classes, they actually signed 10 cornerback prospects. Guys who, at the time they signed, were being talked about as playing cornerback. 2016 had Damar Hamlin, George Hill, Henry Miller, and Theron Coleman. 2017, Jason Pinnock and Damari Mathis. 2018 had Marquez Williams, Judson Tallender, and Malik Carter was recruited as a defensive back. Before he moved to offense, before, midway through his freshman year, he comes out and gets all those snaps in the Duke game and runs for 200 yards or whatever it was on like 7 carries. Revelation on offense. He came to Pitt as a defensive back, as a cornerback. And I think actually before he decided to transfer, they were talking about moving him back to cornerback, but he decided he wanted to stay on offense. That's why he transferred to Albany. And then 2019, they only signed one guy. They signed A.J. Woods. He was the only cornerback in that class. So 10 guys over those 4 classes. Now, if you followed each of those names, if you were keeping track in your head, you know that out of those 10 corners they signed in 4 classes, there's only 4 who are playing cornerback on Pitt's 2020 roster. Damar Hamlin moved to safety. George Hill never even played. He was ruled medically ineligible, I think it was. He had a condition that they found the summer prior to his freshman year, so he never even suited up for a training camp practice. Henry Miller moved to safety and then linebacker and then transferred. Theron Coleman bounced kind of between safety and cornerback. He transferred. I think he's at Western Michigan right now. It's either Western or Central. So that's your 2016 class. 4 guys signed, none of them playing cornerback on the 2020 roster. 2017, you got Pinnock and Mathis, so there's 2. All right, that's cool. 2018, 3 guys signed. Marquez Williams, Judson Tallender, and Malik Carter. Marquez Williams is still playing cornerback, so there's 1. All right, so you got 3 guys, Pinnock, Mathis, and Williams. Judson Tallender moved to safety this summer, I should say. Malik Carter, as I just mentioned, moved to running back and then transferred to Albany. And then 2019, A.J. Woods. So 10 guys signed, 4 of them still playing corner. And that's how you end up with this depth issue. 2 of those guys are starters, Pinnock and Mathis. The other one, Williams, has been a backup since he got here. Never really seen significant snaps. And even, after his redshirt year in 2018, really didn't see significant snaps last year. And then the other one, A.J. Woods, is a sophomore. He's his second season as a college player, and he only played special teams last year. That's where the depth is, or where it's not. And that's why you see 3 safety corners playing corner from that 2020 class. And you see them going to get Khalil Anderson and Noah Bigelow. And I feel like there was another one. Let me bring up the commitment list. I feel like there's another cornerback in this class, and I'm blanking on it. Let me see. Look down the Noah Bigelow, Khalil Anderson. Just 2 right now. And then the potential, I think, probably to add another 1 or 2 to end up signing like 4 in this class. So you really couldn't afford to have an injury or a guy lost at cornerback. I mean, that was the one position on defense that you really didn't want to lose anyone. Maybe not the only position, but it certainly was a position that you didn't want to lose anyone. And now they lost arguably their best corner. It's going to be really interesting to see if Damari Mathis chooses to come back next year. I don't think Jason Pinnock will return if he's able to put together a senior year and put some film out there, although maybe he puts out some feelers to the NFL and doesn't get a draft grade that he likes and decides to come back. That would be the best case scenario for Pitt. But at some point, you're going to have to kind of bite the bullet and break in some new guys, break in some young players, some young defensive backs. I really like Khalil Anderson in this 2021 class. I think he comes in next year, and if Pinnock and Mathis are not back, I think he's going to have a chance to get out there and play as a freshman. I think he can be really good. I think we've got him underrated on Rivals.com. As of Tuesday, he's let me find where he is. He's ranked as a 5.5 3-star. 5.5 on the Rivals rating scale is the lowest possible 3-star. And that's, that's got to come up because he's much better than that. I think he's a much better player than a 3-star prospect. And I think he's going to show that once he gets on campus. But they're going to keep adding those numbers and trying to build those guys up. Like I say, if you got Pinnock and Mathis back in 2021, that'd be great. That would help that defense along. We talk about all the guys they're going to lose from the defense between 2020 and 2021. The more you can bring back, the better. If they're able to get Pinnock and Mathis back, well, that's great. That would be a big boost. If they're able to get Phil Campbell to come back, or maybe a Rashad Weaver or a Keyshawn Camp to come back, man. Maybe if they could get Damar Hamlin for a 6th year to come back, I don't think anybody at Pitt would complain about that. I don't know if Damar wants to play a 6th year at Pitt. I think he'll probably be ready to move on with his life's work at that point and try and pursue a future in the NFL at that point. But any of those guys they can get to come back, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to have them back. Just as a brief aside on that topic, as I'm thinking about it, you look down the list of seniors, you think about the guys who are on this team who are seniors, who are going to get kind of a chance to play an extra year that they probably didn't assume they would have. There's some intriguing guys that if they could bring back, 2021 could be a pretty good season. If they could bring back Jimmy Morrissey, or Kenny Pickett, maybe even a guy like a Bryce Hargrove. If they could bring back Lucas Krull, I think is going to be really good this year at tight end. If they could bring him back. If you could get some of those defensive linemen like I talked about, or any of those guys on defense to come back as seniors, or Alex Kessman. I think or Kirk Christodoulou. I guess he redshirted. Cal Automitis. You might as well bring back your long snapper because, hey, why take the chance? Why not go with the guy and is reliable and have a 5th-year senior as a long snapper? It could really change the complexion of what that 2021 season was looking like. Because I think we all sit back and we say, okay, 2020, man, there's everything coming together here. You've got this really good / great defense with a ton of returning starters and lots of experience and talent all over the place. You've got a quarterback who will be in his 3rd year as a starter. You've got a center who's going to be in his, 4th year as a starter. You've got these experienced, talented players all over the roster. And I think that's why when we talked about the possibility of the 2020 season getting bumped off because of COVID-19 and the pandemic and games getting canceled and all this kind of stuff, we talked so much about how disappointing that would be for Pitt when they've got what looks to be a very good team lined up, a team that could have a lot of success. And then we talked about how much of a drop-off 2021 would be with all of those guys gone, where you're rebuilding a ton on defense and some key positions on offense, notably the center and the quarterback. But if you change that equation just a little bit and some of those guys come back, and I don't know who would want to come back. I don't know which guys would choose to do that. I think Jimmy Morrissey's going to have a chance to play in the NFL. I think Kenny Pickett is going to have a chance to play in the NFL. I think Taysier Mack is going to have an opportunity. I don't know if he's going to get drafted or not, but I think he's going to have an opportunity. I think Lucas Krull is going to have an opportunity to play in the NFL. Like a bunch of those guys on defense are going to have an opportunity to play in the NFL. Do they want to come back and play another year? Do they want to come back and try to improve their draft stock or just have fun for one more year of college football? Because college football should be fun. College should be fun. There may be guys out there who are thinking, I'm getting screwed out of my senior year of college football. I should be able to enjoy myself, have a great senior season, and ride off into the sunset like that. Not the way that I'm going out now with COVID-19 and a screwed up schedule and questions every week about whether or not we're going to be able to play and whether or not we're sick and who we're going to play against and if our opponents are going to have to forfeit or who knows what's going to happen. You know what I mean? Really living week to week with uncertainty. And there could be some guys who are like, you know what? I'm coming back. If the NCAA says I can come back and Pitt will have me, Pitt will pay for my education again, they'll give me another scholarship, I'm going to come back and do it. I can't rule that out as being some guy's thought process. Even guys who might have a future in the NFL. Now, you do have to balance that against the possibility of getting hurt. If you've got an opportunity to go to the NFL, do you want to... I mean, there's always going to be a risk of injury. Do you want to have that injury come when you're playing in college for free or when you're playing in the NFL and you're getting a paycheck? That's a decision some of these guys are going to have to make. And I wouldn't be surprised if some go and some decide to return. I don't think it'd be a mass return. I don't think the entire senior class is going to come back. And I think there'll be underclassmen who go, guys who are draft eligible who will leave for the NFL. But I think there are going to be some guys who return. The ones to watch will be at those key positions. Quarterback. Does Kenny Pickett come back? And that opens a whole other can of worms, because if Kenny Pickett comes back, do Davis Bevel and Nick Patty and Joey Yellen all want to sit behind him? And I feel like we've talked a lot about quarterbacks and transferring and whether quarterbacks will transfer, who wins the backup job and this and that. We talked a lot about that, I think, last week when we talked about Joey Yellen getting ruled eligible. And I think it's just because there's a feeling that just quarterbacks transfer. This is what they do. If they don't see a clear path to the starting job, they bail. And, I don't know if that's how Davis Bevel or Nick Patty would be thinking, but I mean, that's how Joey Yellen is here, right? He didn't see a clear path to the starting job at Arizona State, and so he's here now because of that. What would those guys think? How would they react if they know Kenny Pickett's coming back for one more season? Now, it's only one more year. It would only be one more year, and those guys would have another year of eligibility themselves. So it's not using up one of their prime years of college football if Kenny Pickett were to come back. But I don't know. It's going to be really interesting. I mean, there's a million things I can't wait to see how they play out. And it's a lot of it is out of morbid curiosity. What are games actually going to look like? I think I'm going to talk about this on the Panthers Insider Show on 93.7 The Fan this past weekend. Saturday mornings, 8 a.m. on 93.7 The Fan, we get together and talk about Pitt sports. And I think I talked about it there. I don't think it was on the podcast. But every now and then I sort of let my mind wander to imagine what it really... imagine what it's really going to look like when a season happens. You know what I mean? Like, professionally, what is the press box going to look like? Are they going to give us hot dogs at halftime? Probably not. I'm guessing there won't even be a coffee machine running in the press box. Are fans going to be in the stands? How many are going to be in the stands? If they let fans in, how are they going to get them in? How are they going to get them out? What are the fans going to be able to do when they're actually there? Brock Medanik just asked, will Pitt allow people to attend games? I'm dying to find that out myself, Brock. I don't know. And I don't even know if Pitt knows. I imagine Pitt is leaning a certain way. I imagine Pitt is in regular conversation with the Steelers and regular conversation with government officials, because they're the ones who are going to be making that decision. Ultimately, the government is going to decide what's allowed in terms of gatherings and whether or not fans can be at games. You've already seen what the PIAA said, that you can't have fans at high school games. You've obviously got more space at Heinz Field and Beaver Stadium and these college stadiums. Lincoln Financial, I think Temple plays there, right? You've got more space there, so you should be able to get people in and spread them out while they're at the game. But are they going to have to wear masks? How are they going to come in? How are they going to go out? Are you going to allow tailgating? What's it going to look like on the field? How are you going to, are you going to be limited in the way you substitute guys? Is it going to be, I don't know. There's just so many questions. And when I let my mind wander about the practicality of what this is actually going to look like, the logistics, minute to minute of how these things are going to work, I don't want to say it makes my head hurt, but there's just so many ways this thing can go. And I don't know if anybody really knows just yet what it's going to be like. And then you roll that clock forward, you get to November, December, regardless of what we get over the next 4 months, you start having all these questions about, are guys coming back? Are guys leaving for the NFL? Who's going to return? Who's going to stay on scholarship? How does that affect their scholarship numbers for the class of 2022? Remember, I think I talked about this last week. I know I wrote about it in the 321 column on Friday. Man, this eligibility thing from the NCAA, giving all these guys just a free year and saying seniors, everybody gets a free year. The seniors can come back. That's great. It's what they should do. Give these guys an extra year. It's what they did with the spring sports too. But boy, that simple idea has tentacles that just go so far. It's wild to think about what it could mean. Because dig this, all right? Think about this. Now, 2021, okay? You can bring seniors back. Everybody can come back. Great. You got this full recruiting class coming in. Great. The NCAA loosens the limits on 85 scholarship players. You're only allowed 85 scholarship players on the roster right now. The NCAA loosens it to allow you to bring all your seniors back. Great. Pitt has like 106 guys on scholarship in 2021. Great. Side note, Pitt has to decide. Pitt has to actually choose to put 106 guys on scholarship, which will be an interesting decision to make when you're in the midst of a financial downswing because of the loss of football revenue. Which, I mean, even if they get 10 games played, 11 games played, they're going to have a loss of revenue. But let's just say Pitt puts 106 guys on scholarship. Cool. Great, right? 2021, you play with 106 guys on scholarship. The NCAA says it's cool. But then the NCAA says 2022, you need to be back down to 85. How's that going to work? Because in 2022, you'll lose your seniors. Take however many, 15, 18, 20 guys off the roster. That'll be around 85. That'll leave you with 85 or so returning players. But that's your whole scholarship limit. Just in returning players. Where's the room for the incoming freshmen? Now, maybe the NCAA creates a sliding scale. They don't just make it unlimited in 2021 and jump right back to 85 in 2022. Maybe they gradually slide it down. You go unlimited in 2021, and then you can have 100 in 2022, and then 95, and then 90. But you're going to be returning an entire roster of scholarship players in 2022, not including your incoming freshmen. If they just jump right back to 85 scholarships for 2022, you'll have no scholarships to use on the 2022 recruiting class. Now for Pitt, that's not the worst thing in the world because Western Pennsylvania, the Whippeal in 2022 is not that great, not that strong. 2021 looks stronger. 2023 looks great with guys like Rodney Gallagher and Tamir Robinson and Cameron Cheatham. There's some really good players in Western Pennsylvania for the 2023 class. Those are guys that are freshmen going into their sophomore years. And there's some really good players in this 2021 class. Pitt's already got Elliott Donald. They've got Nakai Johnson. They've got Stephon Hall. They're trying to get Derek Davis. There's good players in the 21 class, really good players in the 23 class. 22, not so strong. So if there's going to be a year where you just have no scholarships to give, the 2022 class wouldn't be the worst one to have. Now, it's not going to work out like that. They're not going to end up with no scholarships to give. But until they release their plan on how they're going to actually make that work, which, silly me, I'm kind of naive. I kind of would like to think that before the NCAA said, everybody gets a free year, they also would have, they would think it through and have a plan for how that's going to work. That's just me, though. I always look for the bright side of things. You know, I'm always looking for how things can work out in the best case scenario. This is why I'm terrible at fantasy football. And this has been on my mind a lot because I've got a couple fantasy football drafts coming up. But I'm always thinking about the best way things can work out. This guy can be really good. Marlon Mack can be a running back one. Dalvin Cook can stay healthy. Odell Beckham can bounce back from an absurdly bad year last year. Dak Prescott can return or can repeat at what he did last year. I always look for the upside in things. So I'm a hapless Pirates fan for many years running now. I would like to think the NCAA had a plan on how this was all going to work, on how this is all going to work. There's part of me that thinks they don't have a plan on how this is all going to work. We asked Pat Narduzzi about it last week. Basically just roster management. How are you going to do this? How are you going to do this not just this year, but next year and 2 years from now? And he just basically said, well, we'll see. You know, we'll figure that out down the road. Not worried about it. We'll make sure everybody who wants to be on scholarship will be on scholarship and this kind of thing. I don't think he knows either. And I think the general feeling is that there's so much time between now and then that, and there's so many uncertainties and so many things that could change between now and then, that nobody's really, nobody at like the level of like the coaches and assistant coaches are really getting too worked up about it right now. They're just focusing on this season, focusing on their season openers, and focusing on trying to get ready to actually play some football. In that regard, we got some other news on Tuesday. Pitt's season opener was announced, which actually, if you're on Panther-Lair.com on Monday morning, we said that we were hearing a rumor about who that opponent might be for Pitt's season opener on September 12th, and it turned out to actually be right. Pitt scheduled with Austin Peay, the university. It's in Tennessee. I always feel like they're in Texas, I think, because it's called Austin and Austin, Texas. They're actually in the Ohio Valley Conference, and a pretty decent FCS team. Ohio Valley Conference canceled their season. They're postponed, I guess, is the proper verbiage. They postponed their season, but they gave their member schools an opportunity to play. They said, if you guys want to go get games, you can. So Austin Peay actually opens the college football season on Saturday night at 9 o'clock against Central Arkansas. That game's being played in Alabama, because if you have a school from Tennessee against a school from Arkansas, where else would they play but Montgomery? 9 o'clock on ESPN, if you want to watch it. 404 Strang say, can we get an in-depth review of Austin Peay after their game on Saturday? No, I'm not going to be doing that, because actually one of the aforementioned fantasy football drafts that I have is Saturday night, so I'm going to be a little occupied with that. You guys tell me what you thought of Austin Peay when you watch their team play on Saturday night. Pitt will host them on Saturday, September 12th at Heinz Field. That'll be the season opener for the Panthers. Austin Peay has Central Arkansas this weekend. They're playing Pitt on the 12th, and then they actually have a game at Cincinnati scheduled for September 19th. So they've got 3 games they're moving forward with, even though the Ohio Valley Conference has called their season off. Austin Peay is moving forward with playing some games, all away from home, but they want to get out there and play. Who is Austin Peay? They're the Governors. That's their name. They went 11-4 last year and advanced to the quarterfinals of the FCS championship tournament. And it was funny because when I posted about Austin Peay as a potential 11th game opponent on Monday morning, I started typing up a post. Hey, here's a rumor that we're hearing that Pitt could schedule a game against Austin Peay. And I said, well, I'll get a little bit of background info on the team and who they have coming back and what they look like. And I started looking it up, and I saw that last year they went 11-4 and advanced to the quarterfinals of the FCS championship. And I said, oh, Lord, I can already see the replies of people bemoaning the fact that Pitt scheduled a team that went 11-4 last year and got that close to the FCS championship, because Pitt fans, if nothing else, are scared of their own shadow. And I know Pitt lost to Youngstown State. I know in Pat Narduzzi's first game, it was against Youngstown State. They won, it was 45-37. I know they went to overtime against Youngstown State in 2017. I know Pitt has lost games that they should win in the past, but I mean, you really don't, you shouldn't feel like you need to be scared of an FCS opponent. You want to start talking about Cincinnati or UCF or some of these group of 5 teams that have been good. Okay, that's one thing. But even if it's a team that went 11-4, even if it's a team that made the Elite 8 of the FCS championship, you shouldn't be immediately scared and say, why did you schedule them? Should have gotten a lighter team. And for whatever it's worth, they did lose their leading rusher from a year ago. They did lose their starting quarterback from a year ago, although he's a guy who filled in for the original starting quarterback, and that original starting quarterback he's back this year. So you've got, that. They also have their top receiver back, who's a really good player. He actually had like 89 catches for 1,500 yards and like 13 touchdowns or something like that last season. So he's a really talented wide receiver, going to get tested. Or going to be a test for whoever steps in for Damari Mathis, kind of bringing it full circle there. But Brock Madonic says should have scheduled Temple. I mean, really? Like, what would be the upside in playing Temple as opposed to playing an FCS team? What you need if you're Pitt is a warm-up game before you jump into 10 straight games of ACC opponents. You need a warm-up. And an FCS opponent, even if it's a team that was pretty good last year, ranked as one of the best defenses in FCS last year, you still should be able to handle them at home. That still should be a warm-up game for you if you're Pitt, and more so than Temple. And I haven't researched Temple to see what they've got coming back. I don't know how strong their team looks, but give me the FCS team and get your warm-up in. If you're Pat Narduzzi, maybe avoid that inclination you have toward hiding things and just go out and play your game and work out whatever kinks you have so you're ready to go when you play Syracuse and you dive headlong into this ACC schedule. I think it was, it's a fine opponent to schedule. I think, there were complicating factors in trying to find an opponent for this game. You needed to get a team that was going to meet your standards for COVID-19 testing and protocols and quarantines and all of those things. You needed to find someone who's going to be on the level that you're at. And not all these teams, and Pat Narduzzi said this last week, not all the teams that are out there, FCS teams who might have been looking for opponents, not all of them have the resources to meet those standards. And if they're not going to meet those standards, you can't play the games. And that's what Pat Narduzzi said. He said that was a driving factor as they went out and looked for these teams. He said, we have to find someone that meets our standards or UPMC standards. And so apparently Austin Peay checks that, checks all the boxes. And I think they'll be a good test for Pitt. Like I say, with a really good wide receiver and a pretty talented FCS defense, I think they'll be a good test for Pitt. While also serving as an adequate warm-up game, like I say, before they jump into those ACC games. All right, let's get a few comments here, a few questions. S. Max says, Pat Narduzzi was hilarious on the Zoom call today. Yeah, on Tuesday, Pat Narduzzi had a Zoom call with local reporters. And at one point, Will Graves from the Associated Press asked Pat Narduzzi about the fact that Pitt did not show up in the Associated Press top 25 poll, what he thought about that. And Narduzzi, in sort of typical fashion, said he doesn't care about the polls, he doesn't pay attention to those things. But somehow it came out that one of the people on the call was Jerry DePaula, of course, from the Trib. And Jerry votes in the AP top 25, and Jerry did not have Pitt in his top 25. And Pat Narduzzi had some choice words for Jerry DePaula in the light of that revelation. And it's funny to juxtapose the two statements of not caring about the polls and the rankings and also giving Jerry a hard time about not including him in the polls and the rankings. It's funny how that works. I thought you didn't care too much about that. Brock Madonic asks, thoughts on Judson Tallender and the two freshmen, Javante Royal and Rashad Battle, with Damari Mathis being out. Yeah, like I say, Tallender moved from corner to safety. To be honest, he was in that 2018 recruiting class. If you had asked me in the summer of 2017 after Judson Tallender committed, because he actually came up to Pitt and worked out at their prospect camp in June. And I saw him work out at that camp, and he played corner at the camp. And seeing him, I thought that guy's probably going to be a safety when he gets to college. I'll be surprised if he sticks at corner. He has good size to play safety. And I think he played like a safety more than a corner. He looked like he could be a better fit as a safety than a corner. I'm surprised he made it to, what is he now, a redshirt sophomore year, training camp of his redshirt sophomore season. I'm surprised he made it to this point still practicing at cornerback. Now, he has moved to safety. Pat Narduzzi told us that last week, I guess it was. So he's going to be out of the mix at corner, and I don't see them moving him back. I think he'll be in the mix at corner. You've obviously got in the mix at safety. You've obviously got Damar Hamlin and Paris Ford as your top two safeties. Eric Hallett and Brandon Hill behind those two. Tallender kind of in the mix with those guys competing for some of those backup snaps at safety. As far as the freshmen, Rashad Battle and Javonte Royal, it's kind of funny because when I was writing the article today on Damari Mathis being out, and I was talking about the guys who are going to back him up or the guys who could play themselves into a 2-deep role or even a starting job, I had to do a double take of the commitment list and remind myself that Rashad Battle and Javonte Royal were both 4-star prospects. And they have to be, I would think, some of the quietest 4-star prospects that Pitt has gotten in recent years. Javonte Royal and Rashad Battle. And Royal committed in June. He was part of the big June rush last year when Pitt had all the recruits on official visits and everything. Battle committed really at the end of the cycle. I think he might have committed on signing day, a late commitment for Pitt. But a 4-star guy, both 4-star prospects. And as much as we talk about stars, as much as people want highly rated recruits, I don't feel like there was a real palpable buzz about Rashad Battle and Javonte Royal committing to Pitt, even though both were 4-star guys and, obviously, highly ranked. And so it's kind of funny, but now they're coming in and like I said, I think both guys, when they were being recruited, had the potential to play safety. But I think because of the depth issues at cornerback, when the coaches brought them in, they start them off at corner right away. And I don't think that's necessarily their final position. I think there's a possibility one or both of those guys, also Hunter Sellers, who also committed to Pitt last summer, can stick at corner and then kind of go forward from there, get the depth settled at cornerback before they move anybody to safety, which kind of probably to some extent, with Judson Towner, sort of what they did. They wanted to give it time to see if he could stick at corner. I think they're going to do the same thing with Battle and Royal and Sellers and see which of those guys can hang at cornerback before they move anybody to safety. But those guys are going to be in the mix this year. You'll have Pinnock and someone else, maybe Marquez Williams, maybe A.J. Woods, and maybe one of those freshmen. You need 4 corners to fill out a 2-deep, right? And the coaches rotated 3 last year. I would think they would want to have something similar this year. Pinnock, Williams, Woods, maybe, with one of the freshmen making up the rest. Or maybe some of those guys move around a little bit. Maybe Woods jumps Williams. Maybe a freshman jumps Woods. Maybe a freshman jumps Williams. I think there are a few different ways that situation could play out, which, again, is a good reason, I think, to get that FCS game in there. It gives you more opportunity to settle on who you want to roll out there at cornerback so that you're not jumping into the Syracuse game, which is going to be a challenging game for the defensive backs. It always is. You don't want to jump into that game with lingering questions about your defensive backs. You want those positions to be as shored up as possible. And, I think the Austin Peay game will give them a chance to really kind of see what they have in Woods, Williams, and maybe some of the freshmen too. So that's going to be, hopefully we're not talking about this all season long. Hopefully they're able to get it resolved early on and sort of settle into a rotation. But I think there's probably a good chance that we're going to be talking about that cornerback spot at least through the first month of the season, depending on how far the season actually goes. S. Mac says, Antonio Brown comparison for Jordan Addison. Wowza. Yeah, that was something Pat Narduzzi said on Tuesday this week. He was asked, because he's given so much praise to Jordan Addison, the freshman wide receiver from Maryland, which we have been on that train for a long time. I mean, going back to the time he committed last summer, then all through the fall, we've been talking up Jordan Addison and how good we expect him to be at Pitt. And Pat Narduzzi's been really kind of echoing some of those sentiments since training camp started, talking about how good Addison looks as a freshman wide receiver. And he was asked, does Addison remind you of anybody that you've coached, either coached against or coached, on your own team? And he said really the one guy that he would kind of remember is Antonio Brown from his time at Central Michigan. And, I mean, obviously that's a lofty comparison. I mean, say what you want about Antonio Brown, the person, but as a player, Antonio Brown's as good as it got, or as good as it gets, I should say, or as good as it got when he was playing, when he was actively playing. I mean, this is a Hall of Fame caliber talent. And yeah, the off-field stuff derailed that, but he's a Hall of Fame caliber talent, and he was in college too. And to make that comparison for Jordan Addison, I don't think Pat Narduzzi is prone to hyperbole when it comes to his own players. I think he'll try to praise his players when he can. I don't think he wants to overblow their, I don't think he wants to blow up their egos, or their minds, or get their heads too full of themselves or anything like that. To come out and compare Jordan Addison to Antonio Brown, that is a lofty comparison. And from everything we've heard, it's appropriate. We've said from the beginning that I think Antonio Brown. I've said from the beginning that I think Jordan Addison is going to be a contributor to this offense as a freshman. And there's nothing we've heard that's changed that. I think he can be a big player in this offense, potentially a starting wide receiver with Taysier Mack and Shockey Jacques-Louis, possibly Jared Wayne out there. That's the kind of talent level he has. And Narduzzi also gave a shout-out on Tuesday to Aiden Henningham and Jalen Barton, the other freshman wide receivers. He said those guys have been really good too. I do think, and I said this for a while, that I think Pitt really upgraded the skill positions with this 2020 recruiting class. Those three guys at wide receiver, plus Israel Abanikanda at running back, I think those four really are upgrades over what Pitt had coming into this 2020 season. And, I think they're going to be reaping the benefits of that class for quite a few years to come. Let's see here. Scroll down, see if there's any other comments to get here. Let's see. Dale Gribble says, I get mad at Jerry. He's talking about Jerry DePaula. I get mad at Jerry DePaula for not voting us every year. Hometown for what? I think Dale Gribble's saying that Pitt should get some extra love from the AP voters who are in Pittsburgh. And I mean, I see what you're saying, but I think those guys need to be, they need to be objective, right? I mean, they need to vote what they believe, and they can look at the team. And I mean, I think there are benefits and downsides to having, guys who are that close to the team. I mean, Jerry knows Pitt as well as he knows, better than he knows any team in the country. And I know this was the case with AP voters in the past. Ray Fittipaldo had it for a few years. I forgot. I think Kevin Gorman did it for a few years. I mean, those guys knew Pitt better than any other team in the country, and that's a good thing and a bad thing. I mean, you could look at it and say, man, people around the country are missing this and missing this and missing this, like those of us talk about, like fans or some of the media who exclusively cover Pitt talk about. We say, well, people don't realize this or people don't realize that. But we also see all the warts too. And I think, for Jerry, I think some of those warts were coming through. And he kind of said that today that, they lost to Miami and Virginia Tech and Boston College down the stretch. They needed a last-minute comeback to beat Eastern Michigan. Just to get to 8-5, they return these players on offense. They return the coordinator, but the offense wasn't very good last year. So this team has something to prove, and I think, I think they absolutely do have something to prove. I mean, we've talked about it enough. We've talked about what's on the line for this team this season, how they've got the potential to be really good, one of the best Pitt teams in quite some time. But they do have something to prove because they left a lot out there. They left some winnable games on the table in 2019. And if they're really going to reach their potential, they've got to close the deal on those games. You know what I mean? They've got to win those winnable games, which they didn't do last year against Miami, against Boston College. Those are really the two that stick out, and that's the difference between 8-5 and 10-3 is winning those winnable games. And that doesn't even get into Virginia or how close the Penn State game was, or I guess that's really, really it that I would point to. But I think that's where when you have the local voters, I don't think you just want them to be homers. You know what I mean? I think you want them to vote what they believe and objectively and vote their conscience on who they think a team is. And I think Jerry looks at Pitt the way a lot of us look at Pitt, that, hey, they've got something to prove. All right, last question. Brock Madonic says, why is Todd Sibley never talked about? Feel like the kid has potential to be something, just needs an opportunity. Had good games last year against Delaware and Miami. I don't know. I don't know why Sibley seems to fade into the background a bit. I mean, he's never really gotten that many reps. He's never really gotten that much opportunity. You're right. Against Miami, he was really good before he got hurt. I mean, working out of that Wildcat, he was really good. Pat Narduzzi said on Tuesday that they've been working more Wildcat snaps just in case they run into a problem with depth at quarterback this season. So, if they have to go to the Wildcat a little more frequently because they've got quarterback issues. And I think Todd Sibley is, probably one of the, I think, either him or Vincent Davis are your main options to take those snaps. But for whatever reason, I mean, Sibley just hasn't been involved. And I think, we, like media and fans, don't really talk about Sibley as much because he doesn't get as many opportunities. And the coaches don't talk about him as much. So there's something the coaches don't see, it seems, or at least haven't seen thus far in his career. And that kind of trickles down and carries over to sort of what the public perception is. I mean, it's like you said, Brock. We saw him play pretty well against Delaware, really well against Miami, but what else do we really have from his career to base much on? He hadn't done much prior to that and really didn't do that much last year, even before he got hurt. So it's hard to create a lot of hype for a guy who really hasn't done much in his career yet, despite being here. And despite being part of an offense that could have used a spark at running back. And, coaches never really turned to him. So I think that's probably part of it. But you can't rule him out this year because they need running backs, right? They need somebody to step up. You've got A.J. Davis, Vincent Davis, Todd Sibley, Israel Bonaconda, Daniel Carter getting a lot of positive pub in the last week or so as, a big back who came in that 2019 class, played a little bit last year as a fullback, kind of still operates as a bigger back, a little bit of fullback, a little bit of tailback. He's going to be in the mix as well. There aren't going to be enough carries for everybody, of course. So if Todd Sibley's going to carve out his role, I mean, he's got to do it now. He's got to show the coaches what he can do, whether it's in the Wildcat or working out of the regular sort of I formation or the shotgun or whatever it is. Dale Gribble says Todd Sibley's a great kid. Met him before was impressed. Yeah, Todd Sibley's a great kid. I think he's smart and he's insightful. It's been great to interview him when we've had an opportunity to do so. Just don't really talk to him much because he doesn't play a whole lot. All right, final question. Leon Moore 23 asks, how did Damari Mathis get hurt? It said non-football. I don't have any details on that. I don't think anything has really kind of come out about what happened, how he got hurt. I believe it's an upper body injury, not something necessarily with his legs. But we really don't know much other than it's a season-ending injury that, as Pitt said in his press release, was through a non-football situation. So I don't have many details beyond that. Sorry, Leon, I apologize. All right, make sure you check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Like I always say, we cover football, basketball, and recruiting, all at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. And if you enjoy this conversation that we have here on the Panther-Lair Show every Tuesday night, or you listen to the podcast, you enjoy the conversation, the Pitt talk, you go to the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, and we will have those conversations there. We do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We talk about Pitt sports, and that's it. It's just hundreds and thousands of Pitt fans just gathering online, best online community of Pitt fans, my opinion, gathering online to talk about Pitt sports. What's better than that, right? You are a Pitt fan. You want to talk about Pitt sports. Get on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com and have that conversation with other Pitt fans. Panthers Insider Show coming up on Saturday morning, 8 a.m. on 93.7 The Fan. Make sure you tune in for that. We'll be talking about Damari Mathis, Austin Peay, and everything else that goes on in Pitt sports between now and then, anything else that comes up. So we will have those conversations there. Make sure you tune in for that, 93.7 The Fan, 8 a.m. on Saturday morning, the Panthers Insider Show. Home Field Apparel. Go check it out, homefieldapparel.com. Their Pitt Vintage Collection. Excellent shirts, high quality, great designs. Use the promo code LAIR, L-A-I-R, to get 20% off your Pitt Vintage order. And yes, while you are here, like the video, that's cool, but find the button to subscribe to the youtube.com Panther-Lair channel. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair.com. One word. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Go there, click subscribe. We want to get those subscriber numbers up. Look at where we're at. We're like 900 and some. We want to get to 1,000. That's the goal. That's my target. Help me out. I know a lot of you guys watch this live stream. Really appreciate it. You listen to the podcast. Really appreciate it. You're on the website. Really appreciate it. Twitter, Facebook, all these places. I appreciate you guys following us. Go subscribe, Panther-Lair.com on YouTube. And then if we do have a random, live reaction, live stream, because some news happens, a big commitment or an injury or something like that, we'll go live. You'll get a notification about it. You'll know that we're going live to talk about these things. So if you subscribe to Panther-Lair.com on YouTube, again, it's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks for the conversation, as always, here on Tuesday night. We appreciate it. If you're listening to the podcast through the week, thank you as well. We appreciate that. Come stop by on Tuesday nights at 8:30 on our YouTube channel and have this conversation in person, or as close to in person as we can get in this time of the coronavirus. Have a great rest of the week. We will talk to you Saturday morning for the Panthers Insider Show, and then we'll be back after the weekend next Tuesday night for another Panther-Lair podcast. Thanks again, and have a great week, everybody.